So good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here in KL this morning to give an insight or an overview from a Trimble perspective as to some of the technologies that are evolving within the geospatial arena, and then looking at how they're being applied to help solve some of the global challenges that the world is facing today. So we just take a look at really some of the areas initially, just to put some context around the presentation, of where geospatial information can be used, or where it is being used today to solve some of these problems, whether it is feeding the growing population. We've already seen a lot of statistics this morning about agriculture, and I'll come back to agriculture a little later in the presentation. Again, from a land management cadastral system, the ability to secure land tenure for the majority. Again, we've heard already how the majority of land today, or land management applications and systems, aren't operating or aren't in place. So how can we help support that process and utilize some of the technologies we have today to enhance that process and make it more efficient? And then meeting the demands for utilities, into natural resources, etc. Again, how can you make that more efficient? And then into public safety and security. So what I'd like to do in the next couple of slides is just look at some of the technological advances that are taking place and how that's coming together, and then demonstrate how that's being applied into some specific industry situations. So if we look at some of the technology changes we're seeing today, so what's out there? Well, there's significantly more sensors today than there were maybe 10 years ago. We're also now seeing that sensor integration. So it's not individual sensors out there, but we can now look at mobile mapping solutions, etc., or UAVs that are integrating a number of different sensors, whether that's GNSS capabilities, scanning capabilities, photogrammetric capabilities. So bringing those together is enhancing the ability to capture data. Then we're looking at the processing power that's enabling real-time information, and that's becoming more and more critical to a majority of industries and majority of enterprises, is how quickly can we get that data, how quickly are we able to make the decisions that we need to make around that data, or utilize that data to make those decisions. Obviously, we have the big data, and we saw from Matthew the size of the data and the way data is being collected today. And we see this continued exponential growth in the collection of data. But I think the key thing is not so much the collection of data, it's how are we using that data? How are organizations, whether they're public organizations or private organizations, able to interpret that data and make the decisions they need to make from a subset of this huge amount of data that we're collecting today? A lot of that is being enabled through the cloud computing and the connectivity that now exists in the world, and then we get into the visualization and interaction. So we're not just using 2D maps or plans anymore. We can get into this 3D visualization with fly through, and it's far easier to interpret the results of the data when we can see it in 3D. So we've seen really that it's not just we've got the technologies, the connectivity, and then the analytics, or the analytical and decision-making capabilities are now converging, which helps any organization in the world to operate more effectively, again, whether it's public or private industries. If we look at the geospatial evolution, as we come from the more traditional thoughts around collecting data and processing data, but now we get into the modeling world and getting that visualization, and that can be data modeling or it can be process modeling. So not only how do we see that data, but how can we be more effective in the way that we go about our day-to-day business from a process perspective? And then we get into the analytical side of life and into the decision support. So whether we're looking at a work management for a set of field workers on how they operate out in the field, how can we manage their dispatch or their routing on whatever their daily requirements are? If there's suddenly an emergency situation, which technician is closest to the emergency, who has the appropriate skills, that we can then take them off their current role and move them to where they're needed. Looking at cost analysis or time analysis, that can be from fleet management, from vehicles, it can be on the farm from looking at tractors, it can be on the construction site from looking at the machinery, whether it's dozers, excavators, etc. And then we get into the deformation side, so whether we look at monitoring of dams, of mines, or the vertical building infrastructure. So again, we can view what's happening over time, we can do that event management, and hopefully we can bring the predictive tools in place as well that can determine if there's a potential risk out there, and then obviously we can move people away and mitigate that risk. And then from a farm perspective, getting into not just the ability to plant the crops in an accurate way, in the most effective way, but also the yield management from the farm, so determining what the yield is coming off the land, identify if there are gaps there, if there's a part of the land that isn't as efficient as other parts, and then that can be worked and made to, or brought back up to the efficiency of the rest of the farm. So really it is, I think, as we look around the industries and government organizations, is how can we ensure that we're providing those effective tools to support the analysis and the decision support to make those organizations more efficient, more productive than they are today. So I think when you look at geospatial information and the way the world has changed over the last decade, it really now sits at the heart of the majority of enterprises out there in the world. And when you talk to a lot of customers, I think when you get up to the executive level of a lot of customers, they don't actually realize how critical that geospatial information is to the operations of their enterprise, to the productivity and efficiency of their enterprise. If you think today, and you can apply this into numerous situations where data can be coming from multiple sources. So we see on the left-hand side here, this could be citizens and consumers who are capturing data using their smart devices and sending that information into an enterprise, whether it's a utility company because a light bulb is out in the street or there's a pothole in the street. That information can be crowdsourced rather than requiring an expert to go out and collect that data. The data could be coming from machines, whether that's machines on a construction site, machines on a farm, on a connected farm, the connected construction site, or machines out there from a fleet or from a large logistics tracking firm. And then you've got your mobile crews as well. So this data can be moving around the enterprise, coming from multiple sources, can be used then to help the enterprise be more efficient. And obviously on the bottom left-hand side is for the executives, for the management, all the management information they need to understand how the operation is working. So we're looking here, really now we see the geospatial capability is really at the core and the heart of numerous industries. And it's in how can we help bring that together, speed up the information, make it more real time to provide a better decision-making capability. Now, for those that have come from a geospatial profession, from surveying, GIS, etc., the role of the individual is changing dramatically here as well. Historically, it's all around going out there, collecting the data, and really with that meticulous precision around where the data came from. We're now migrating through this, it's going away from the data collection, because the data collection is coming from multiple sources. It could be remote sensing, it could be crowdsourcing, it could be the surveyor using the more traditional methods. It's migrating more now into the interpretation and quality control around that data, and then into that analytical modeling and how it's applied to a particular industry to make them more efficient. And it's more around establishing the geospatial context and the validation of the data than around actually the ability to collect the data in an accurate way, because that's going to come from multiple sources. So having given a context in how we see the technology evolving and how we see the capabilities evolving, let's take a look at how the geospatial information is helping to transform some industries out there in the world. So the first one we'll touch on here is agriculture market. Obviously significant to the world as the population grows, the requirement for food is increasing dramatically. There's multiple ways that geospatial information can be applied into agriculture. But what we're seeing from the grower's perspective is by incorporating geospatial information, by having a connected farm that is utilizing all the capabilities, they're actually able to save 25 to 30% of their cost base. And on top of that they become a far more productive farm. And we'll take a look here really at the whole crop production cycle and how this hangs together utilizing geospatial information. So we can start with a land preparation. So again, look in understanding the land, the mapping of the land, the boundaries, etc. Then we get into the planting process, and by utilizing the capabilities and the technology, we don't overlap with the planting. The planting's only in where it needs to be. We haven't got rows overlapping each other, so we're more efficient from the utilization of seeds, etc. Then we get into the nutrient management. So do we need to apply pesticides? Do we need to apply fertilizers? Rather than applying it across the whole farm or the whole field, the capability now exists to identify the health of a particular individual plant and then apply the fertilizer or the pesticide as needed. So a number of benefits in doing that. A, there's a cost reduction in terms of the utilization of the fertilizer or the pesticide, but also there's an environmental impact as well in terms of the reduction of pesticides that are applied into the environment. So again, and you know exactly where that's being used. So you've got that event record that you can keep for whatever reporting, maybe statutory reporting you need to do. You know exactly where anything has been applied. Get into the pest management, and then into the harvesting side. So again, you can do the yield management. You know exactly what you've captured, what you've harvested from the field, and then you can measure the quality of the harvest, and if there are gaps there, and then you can go mitigate that during the off season. And finally, into water management. Again, a key element of farming and for the world is how we manage our water. And again, looking at how you can more efficiently manage the watering of any field. And we'll get into that into the next slides here. So we've talked around the land preparation, but then we start to look at the irrigation piece. So you can get into installing the piping. You can look at the topographic piece of land, so you understand where the water flow may be, so you can manage the water analysis effectively, look at the levels and the levees, so you can build those appropriately for the shape of the land. And then if you're using pivots, so the big pivots that go around, you can actually accurately position the pivot in the center of the field and know exactly where the pivot's going to go. So a number of ways you can use around irrigation, and again it's a drainage, so whether it's subsurface drainage or surface drainage solutions, you can utilize the geospatial information to ensure that you're as efficient as possible from a drainage perspective, but also from the watershed analysis, so knowing exactly where the water is going to flow across the field so you can be as effective and efficient as possible with the usage of your water. So that gives a little overview of how geospatial information can be applied into the agriculture industry. If we look at land administration as another example here, or cadastral area, and again here we see that there's a number of pieces, elements to it from the modern land administration framework. It's around the tenure, the value, the land use, and the land development that comes into that sustainable development process. Now we've already heard this morning about how a significant portion of the world still doesn't have a land administration system in place. And so here we're talking about, the world's 6 billion land parcels, 70 to 75% of them are not formally registered. But we also know that the population of the cities is going to double from 2 billion to 4 billion in the next 30 years. And to prevent from people living in informal settlements, we're really looking at the developing nations have to create the equivalent of a city housing 1 million people every week. I just put that in the context of how you can make that happen over the next 25 years. Now traditionally, so we're looking at a real example here from Africa of how we can utilize both geospatial information but also some of the other capabilities that now exist in the world to start to build out a more effective and faster land administration system. So here we can individuals can go out, they can do the measurement of the boundaries of a property, but also using devices like smart devices, they can start to take more information and attributes around the individuals that are resident in that land. They can take the pictures of the individuals as a record of who's claiming ownership of that land or tenure of that land. And then that can be fed back into the office environment, so when they come to actually start to map out or build that land administration system, they actually have the photographs of the individuals with their ID cards all collected at the same time. Rather than a number of people having to go out, this can be done with fewer resources in a more effective way, fed back into the office environment, and you start to produce that tenure information, and then you can start to build out the land administration networks. These are real life examples of how the geospatial information has been incorporated with new technology to build out those capabilities. Now we look at how geospatial technology is being utilized to transform from a natural resources perspective in supporting the build out of various types of infrastructure networks or utility networks, whether it's in the oil and gas environment, using building information modeling for power plants, for buildings, for offshore marine construction. We can utilize survey and mapping capabilities for pipeline transmission and distribution networks. We can use alignment planning, so using smart software that can determine the most effective way for alignment, whether that's for roads, for rail, or for pipeworks. So again, you can get numerous alignments and then determine which one has the most, or the best environmental fit, the best cost profile, and again, across the type of terrain that the pipelines have to go across. And the last area is looking at how geospatial capabilities are beginning to helping to transform all modes of transportation, whether that can be from a rail network, not just in the construction phase, but also in the maintenance away. So you can, as rail lines become busier and busier, the time for maintenance is reducing dramatically. So how can you build out a more effective methodology for doing that maintenance and reduce the amount of time that the rail networks need to be closed down? From fleet management for the large haul companies, not just a matter of knowing where the vehicles are, but you can understand how their drivers are driving the vehicles from the diagnostics on the vehicle, but also you can look at the fuel consumption, the CO2 emissions, and track and capture all that information, particularly if it's needed for statutory reporting. So numerous ways that geospatial information is now being integrated with other capabilities to help transform multiple modes of transportation. So just to wrap up, just looking at how geospatial information, geospatial capabilities are helping to transform the world, and what benefits are we seeing from this transformation. So one is the economic side. So we're seeing for any organization, public or private, there's enhanced productivity, there's an improved return on investment for the investment in the capabilities and the technology. We're seeing higher yields coming off the land, but also reduced input costs and wastage. And we're seeing improved asset utilization and field worker utilization. And those are very measurable, tangible benefits that are being seen. We're also seeing an improvement in the quality of the finished product, particularly on civil infrastructure development, the safety for the workers and for the population around dams or the workers on a construction site, and also the compliance from a regulatory perspective. So that information can be fed back into the regulatory organizations. And then we're seeing a reduction in environmental impact, whether that's reduction in the use of fossil fuels, reduction in the use of chemicals or water, particularly around in the agriculture market, and then the reduction in waste, whether it's agriculture, civil infrastructure, construction, and again, improved reporting. So the geospatial information really is critical to multiple industries today, and I think we have great opportunities going forward to ensure that, particularly in this region, we can understand how we can utilize and increase the use of geospatial information in our day-to-day roles. So I hope you enjoy the next couple of days at the conference, and thank you very much.